So the Lipschitzes, I never know how to make that name plural. It's not my last name, which is one blessed fucking thing to be thankful for. But that blood, the same blood that soaked the streets in Kishinev in 1903, eventually dead-ended in the panhandle of Texas and became my blood too. And it either stops or goes on with me. Toward that end, I have a perfectly nice wife. She's even half Jewish. She's half Mexican too, but that's beside the point. She's beautiful and sweet, and she wants a baby, a little you, she says. And she says she loves me. I don't know why she loves me, but she tells me that she does almost every day, to the point where if one day goes by and she doesn't say anything, I'm like a fucking mess, and I want to ask her, why didn't you tell me you love me today? Do you think I'm ugly? But I don't ever ask. I just wait, panicked, until the next day, when usually over toast and waffles, or after the blender goes off from all the stinky, healthy drinks she makes us, she looks over at me and she says, I love you, baby. Or sometimes she'll invert it and she'll say, babe, I love you. Or something ridiculously sincere like this. 2 or 3 days a week, she'll even add, you're so handsome, or I think you're so handsome. And it's all so sweet and beautiful and kind, and I fucking hate her for it. I should probably stop here to say that writing about writers is the most boring fucking thing in the world. It's the single worst and most boring, actually wait, after children, writers are the second most boring people to write about. That's because nobody cares about writers. Nobody cares about children either. They only pretend they care about children, because it's like killing puppies not to care about children. So this is why everyone who starts to write a book starts writing about a fucking child. Like your average fucking adult who can read actually sits there and believes that a child of 7 can remember all of these details, or better yet, that all these witty observations and intelligent analysis of the events in a 7-year-old's world is really coming from a 7-year-old's perspective. I'll say it now, and if you don't like it, you can put my book back up on the rack. Nothing happens in a 7-year-old's life that is actually worth writing or reading about. And those 7-year-old talks like that, or when writers do write like a 7-year-old would talk, nobody wants to read that because it's usually just what an adult thinks a 7-year-old talks like, which is really ridiculous because generally, a 7-year-old is just a fucking 7-year-old grabbing his or her genitals at inappropriate moments. And even if he or she went through some really hard stuff, like getting neglected or molested, or a cockroach crawls in their ear and causes encephalitis and irreversible brain damage, or the kid gets beat up a lot for being too girly when he was a boy or too boyish when he was a girl, even if this is the case, it is still a 7-year-old's voice that is detailing this information, and again, it's just not interesting. Okay, maybe there's something to be learned from the abused, neglected, molested, and beaten up 7-year-old with a cockroach in his ear or a rat chewing on his fingertips as he sleeps at night. But do we have to have 358 fucking pages of it, and in a 7-year-old via a 42-year-old's voice to boot? I'd almost rather hear what the adult that the 7-year-old turned into has to say about the events in his or her life when he or she was 7. Like, are they doing the same shit to their own kids, or are they therapists helping others through difficult times vomit, or are they angry or silent or confrontational or infinitely acquiescent? Come to think of it, I don't even want to read about the adult the 7-year-old turned into anymore. I just changed my mind. This whole, oh, I'm a 7-year-old and my innocence lost perspective is really going to teach you a lesson about life, even though it's an off-the-cuff lesson that you'll have to glean from my precocious voice, narrating to you my quotidian experiences that are really more profound than they seem. Thing is just boring, and nobody really wants to read about it except when they feel guilty that society has done this to 7-year-olds, which brings me back to my original assertion that not wanting to read about children is like killing puppies, so everyone's going to pretend they want to read about the raped and murdered 7-year-old, even when they really don't. One amendment to this is Scout Finch. Something happens when Scout Finch talks that makes you not completely care that what Scout Finch has to say is really what Harper Lee had to say, and this is the only exception. Mostly I think it's because it's narrated when Scout's older, isn't it? Is it in first person, whatever? I hate that shit, but regardless, it carefully preserves the youthful squawk of innocence about to be lost. So it feels like a 7-year-old is still telling the story. You know what, I feel a lecture on To Kill a Mockingbird coming on, and I think it's one that should end right here. Just basically know that nobody cares about what kids have to say unless it's Scout Finch. That is the only one. No, not even Holden Caulfield. In fact, especially not Holden Caulfield. As I said, the next group that no one cares to read about is writers, which is why I'm happy I'm not writing about a writer, like every writer has to do at one miserable point in his or her career. I was a writer, but I'm not anymore, so it's not in this story or really relevant to the story because it's not the writing that's at issue. It's about the fact that no matter what the fuck I do, what I get, how much I'm loved, I'm never happy. I'm always certain it'll all be taken away, and I'm the angriest son of a bitch you will ever meet, but you'd never know it unless I told you, which I just did. I can hold shit in like you couldn't believe, acting like shit doesn't faze me, but inside I'm all acid eating my organs, chewing straight through my spleen before starting in on my liver. The way I came up, the Nazis were always marching on El Paso. That's what my mother used to say, and her grandmother Esther used to say the same thing to her, only she'd change it to the Cossacks. They knew what they were talking about. And so how am I supposed to bring a child into this world, a world that has never, not once, made me or anybody related to me happy? You don't. You couldn't, and that's the simplest answer. The bloodline will have to die here. It might have so many times before, so really what's the difference? And you especially don't bring a child into the world when you're in between careers like I am, or when there are trust issues, and let me tell you, there are always trust issues. But anyway, none of it really matters because I finally quit writing that book to follow my true calling, which was to be the illest Jewish MC on earth, and not some fucking washed-up middle-aged punk-ass Beastie Boy either. This is why I like to say I'm in between careers, since this one's taking off somewhat slower than I'd hoped or expected. Though you can't call me unsuccessful by any stretch. I really started off being a DJ for bar mitzvahs. Got tons of work thrown my way via the contacts I made tutoring private school kids around New York. There's like 5 or 10 big bar and bat mitzvahs every weekend in the city, and soon I was DJing most of them and making bank. When I started, Eminem's second record, the Marshall Mathers LP, was still going strong, and it was brilliant. And the kids went nuts dancing to the real Slim Shady and pretty much every other track from that record, so I kept feeding it to them like Scooby snacks. After having to sit in a post-hippie, baby boomer, reformed synagogue for hours listening to the crackly voiced Torah portion and the fucking eunuch cantors wailing, these kids would just let go like little psychos sweating in their little polyester blend suits and ripping off their ties and going freaking crazy no-rhythm Jew boy on the temporary parquet dance floors. These little puberts bugged out whenever I put Slim on. They'd be secretly downing the highballs left on the adults' tables, pumped high on carbs and sugar from the cake and whatever disgusting meat or dairy-filled meal had just been served. And these kids would just be out of their gourds, bugging out, and their folks would see this, and their folks' friends would see this. And soon, I've got more jobs than I can handle, putting on these rap-themed parties for these boys and some girls when their parents don't even know what hip-hop is, beyond that it seems to make their kids happy. Fucking crazy. And I can dance, and I know I could spit an ill rhyme too, and so sometimes I'd head out onto the floor with a mic in my hand and rap over M's tracks, and these kids would just go nuts making a circle around me, all these little shorties waving their hands in the air, especially the little girls from all these private rich girl schools who were pretty much being ignored by the boys who thrashed about, jumping all over each other on the dance floor and working out all of their homosexual tendencies via some hardcore music that was, pretty much doing the same. So one time I'm out there doing my thing over Slim's song Stand, and these kids are rushing the stage and trying to touch me like some screaming NSYNC fans or something, and afterward, this homely little girl with huge glasses that keep sliding down her greasy nose comes up to me and asks for my autograph. So I sign it, Dear Katie. Thanks for the support, Slim Lindy. Lindbergh's nickname was Slim, too. It hit me the first day I really checked out those articles in my great-grandma's hat box, so I immediately jotted down a chart just to be sure I wasn't crazy. Hair, Lindbergh blonde, Eminem blonde. Eyes, Lindbergh blue, Eminem blue. Mother issues, Lindbergh, yes. Eminem, yes, seriously. Dad, Lindbergh died when Lindy was 22. Eminem split when M was born. World famous, Lindbergh loved then hated. Eminem hated then loved. Love life, Lindbergh married first woman he met. Eminem married first woman he fucked. Children, Lindbergh lost child. Eminem almost lost custody of child.